Hey, it's Grayson back here with you. Real interesting story in this week's Time magazine and in The Guardian about J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter fame, and her plea for students not to volunteer at orphanages, and basically condemning the so-called orphanage tourism model that's been occurring in different developing countries, where all this support, a very large amount of support from Western countries like the US and the UK, is being funneled into these orphanages, and especially volunteer traffic from young people. She was speaking at a summit called the One Young World Summit, and at the summit, she stated the quote, "We understand that institutionalization is one of the worst things you can possibly do to a child." And she also stated that these types of institutions, these orphanages in these third world countries, can cause irreparable harm. And further, interestingly enough, when we think of an orphanage here, we think of, okay, this is somebody whose parents maybe died, they didn't have family, the parents were unable to take care of the children. Not a thing where the parents give up the children for their best good and they're forced to do so. But in a lot of these countries, what's happening is that these children are children with disabilities, with different needs, or even just have parents that have been told that, look, these orphanages are well-resourced. There are all these people coming in from countries to volunteer, provide education, provide services. So if you just pretend your child is an orphan, pretend you're not the mother, you're not the father, the kid has no family and needs an orphanage, then your child can get better treatment, better service. But the caveat is that these institutions are very demoralizing because you don't have a normal family structure. You're in an institution. They don't prepare them for having a good life, even with all this extra accoutrement from Western charity money. And I have to say, I absolutely agree with this. I didn't know this was as big of an issue as it is, to the point where the UK government is actually advising their citizens not to go and volunteer at orphanages. And apparently this is very popular, going and volunteering at orphanages, because young students in college, whatever, want to pad their resumes and look better to people. And that in and of itself, that state of charity poserdom, is its own gigantic problem that kind of frustrates me, because it's always like, yeah, my understanding of the problem really came from seeing different charities, different organizations on TV or wherever in person. They'll be like, okay, well, you should be helping these dying, starving children in Africa, which we should. Yes, you are right. You got that. But then the solution they propose is, come with us on this mission trip. You have to go. And I've heard people use rhetoric denouncing people who don't go on foreign mission trips for different organizations as being lesser morally, or they're not as committed to serving or whatever. But my line of thought is, why do we have to go there all the time? Why does there have to be this constant cycling of people coming in from the US to not provide like skills-based volunteering, but to provide basic stuff? Why is this even necessary? Why are we not empowering the local people to do what they need to do and have the services that they want to have? And this is just a particularly egregious example of that. The first thing has to be approaching the people themselves and approaching them as equals, not necessarily seeing yourself as being some sort of superior expert, some sort of all-knowing person, which a lot of these charities are like, yes, orphanage. It's just like, we know this to be the right thing to do, is run an orphanage. But no, the right thing to do is to offer services for kids with disabilities in these communities, or offer better educational service in the general community rather than doing it through these orphanages. And trust me, the mothers, the fathers in these communities would have told you that had you asked them, and had you asked them honestly, and had they not been afraid to give the answer that they knew was in fact correct. And that's the other thing, that's this whole air of superiority thing. There's a lot of authoritarianism and a lot of anti-agency type thinking in the whole charitable social support model and any sort of like helping profession. And this is one of the big things that in our approach here, the fixer punk approach, has to be really, really dispelled, is this idea that the people that are helping have some sort of superior agency, superior level of power to the people that are being helped, when in fact, if you actually listen to the people that are being helped, you'd be able to help them better. Yeah, it sounds logical, but it's kind of forgotten because we're so into having these solutions, these systems, these processes that are rigid and inflexible. This sort of system that's developed over the years of sending people from the US, from the UK, from other first world countries into these orphanages and having the center point, the focal point of service being the orphanage. That system there, that system that's clearly broken, it's harming the kids, but everybody is slaving away at trying to work hard to make this thing work when it's not going to work. And that's sad for the people that are volunteering. I feel for the kids that are going out and I'm going to go and I'm going to help these kids when in fact they're contributing to a system that forces them to go into these institutions, which really, one of the people participating in the summit was a client of one of these orphanages. And she stated that in Kenya, her home country, that the orphanage was next to a giraffe sanctuary, so it was used mostly as a tourist attraction. And they were running it like a business, like a theme park or something like that, for tourists to come in, and that's where all the resources are going. And then it's also incumbent on us to kind of think about, okay, yeah, I want to help, yeah, I want to support charity, yeah, I want to help people, but how do I help people? Not just how do I help people, but how do I help people in a way that respects their own agency and respects what they want? Because I'll tell you one thing, it's kind of hard to figure out what I like, what I want, even in little things in a given day. Nonetheless, what kind of services, what kind of supports, what kinds of things I want for me to have the best quality of life possible. Those are things that you could find out by asking me, but you may not be able to find them out by guessing. That same level of thought, that same process of you can't really guess what Grayson wants should be the same way you think about the family in Africa, is you can't really figure out what you want until you ask them and you find out from their own actions, from their behaviors, from what's expressed verbally and non-verbally. Because sometimes you kind of plant an idea and it's sort of marketed to them. And that's the thing about these orphanages, is that it's almost like a bit of a marketing strategy to the parents there. Okay, if I can get my kid to be classified as an orphan, they'll be given all this great stuff. And if you go ahead and you come in and you say, hey, we're thinking about taking away the orphanage, they'll probably be like, no, that's the only chance we have. Like, no, that isn't the only chance you have. That shouldn't be the only chance you have. And if that's the only chance you have, then the people that are coming up with the idea are messing things up, and that is not your fault. That is theirs. So really, in a couple words, the spirit that we should be using is mutual aid, which it's an anti-authoritarian concept and more of a libertarian way of viewing supporting people. And the name libertarian tends to be very much associated with just leaving people on their own, sort of a Darwinistic approach, but it doesn't have to be that way. It just means that you're acknowledging people's own freedoms, acknowledging people's own agency. And this whole model of charity where you feel like you have to keep them in your nice tight grip and you have to do things in a way that makes you, not them, feel like you're helping, and in a way that makes you, the person who's giving, feel like you're in control. That model is one that just needs to go. I'm going to try to, on the Fixer Punk podcast, kind of break down some models and how you could implement more of a mutual aid-oriented strategy and organization, how you can give people more agency and more control. One model that's very compelling to me, especially as somebody that supports the concept of universal basic income, is something called Give Directly, that has been shown in evidence, study after study after study, to really work just by transferring money, just by transferring a small amount of money to people in these communities that are hurting, and they found that they know what to spend it on. but it doesn't necessarily have to be in that sort of capitalistic vein, although I think that's totally fine. I think it's a great place to start. But any time you can give more power to the people, that should be an objective. It should be an objective. It should be on the list of objectives. The list of objectives shouldn't just be feed hungry children, do this, provide education. Right there on that same list of objectives, all those things are important, should be their own self-determination. And trust me, the results will come out way better. And just train yourself to think about it and like it. And think about it like they're one of you. They're not another. They're people like you and I, no matter where you're serving. Even if you're serving at a homeless shelter, it's not supposed to be some sort of stodgy environment where they're just lining up at your mercy. You're with them, and subtle little ways of showing that can go a long way, and then building out toward the systemic and the planning and the overarching mission of these types of organizations. And be sure to check out the Fixer Punk podcast coming soon. If you're subscribed to this channel, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell, and you will find out when the Fixer Punk podcast is available. And there we'll be breaking down actual solutions. So we'll be taking all these concepts, all these ideas I'm telling you in these videos, and breaking them down into sort of a roadmap, more of a plan of how to use these ideas in a way that's effective and to create change like no one in the mainstream has ever done before, because the most punk rock thing you can do in today's political and social climate is actually solve people's problems and care about them. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you on the next video or on the podcast.